You know what they say about assumptions? Yeah, well, turns out the biggest assumption in human history was thinking that big, glowing rock in the sky was just a dead chunk of stone. Spoiler alert, it wasn't. My name is Kex-Nine, and I have been watching you humans from Luna Base for the past 300 Earth years. Not by choice, mind you. Being assigned to human observation duty is basically the galactic equivalent of getting stuck on permanent bathroom cleaning detail. But here's the thing that nobody in the Galactic Council saw coming. You magnificent, ridiculous creatures turn out to be the most entertaining show in the universe. Let me paint you a picture of how this whole cosmic joke started. 3 centuries ago, when your species was still figuring out that maybe sticking metal rods into electrical outlets wasn't the brightest idea, the Council decided Earth needed monitoring. Not because you were dangerous. Oh, how wrong they were about that. But because you were supposedly too primitive to notice a massive artificial satellite hanging in your sky. The plan was simple. Hollow out your natural moon, install the most advanced observation equipment in known space, and watch the primitive humans stumble around until you either evolved or went extinct. Standard procedure for species classification, really. What could possibly go wrong? Everything. Absolutely everything. I still remember the day Captain Rex Hawkins first looked through that telescope and started asking inconvenient questions. It was July 1969, and we were having our monthly staff meeting in the central observation deck when the alerts started screaming. Sir, squeak Plex 2, our junior technician whose voice always cracked when he was nervous, the humans just landed on us. Commander Voss Prime, a 7-foot-tall, blue-skinned veteran of 40 different observation missions, looked up from his morning stimulant with the kind of expression you'd expect from someone who just watched their retirement plan spontaneously combust. "They what?" he growled, his 3 eyes narrowing to dangerous slits. "Armstrong and Aldrin, sir. They are currently bouncing around on surface level 7, about 2 kilometers from emergency airlock 42. The silence that followed was the kind of quiet that makes your ears ring. Then Voss Prime did something I'd never seen him do in my 50 years of service. He laughed. Not a chuckle, not a snort, but a full-blown, belly-shaking laugh that echoed through the entire command center. "They landed on the moon," he wheezed between gasps, "and they're calling it the greatest achievement in human history. If only they knew they just successfully invaded the most classified military installation in 3 spiral arms of the galaxy. With a tin can and some rockets that looked like they were held together with hope and excessive amounts of duct tape. But that was just the beginning. See, humans have this annoying habit of not staying where you put them. Within 50 years, you had rovers crawling all over Mars, probes flying past every major celestial body in your solar system. And worst of all, you kept coming back to Luna. I was there when the Chinese landed their Chang'e missions. Watching through our external cameras as their little rovers trundled across the surface, completely oblivious to the fact that they were driving over what was essentially the galaxy's most expensive parking garage. The Council was having collective heart attacks back on Centauri Prime, sending increasingly frantic messages about maintaining the Prime Directive and species contamination protocols. Then came the moment that changed everything. May 15th, 2087. I will never forget it, because it was the day I realized humans weren't just lucky. You were dangerous. Captain Marcus Stone of the Artemis 7 mission was setting up what you called a permanent research station on the lunar South Pole. We've been watching him and his team for weeks, making jokes about how they were basically camping in our backyard without permission. Standard human behavior. See empty space, immediately try to claim it and plant a flag. But Stone was different. Where other astronauts had focused on collecting rocks and taking pictures, he was scanning. Deep scanning. His equipment was picking up anomalies in the lunar subsurface that our stealth systems weren't designed to hide from. Kex-Nine, Voss Prime, called from his station, "What exactly is that human doing with that array?" I pulled up Stone's readouts on my console, feeling that familiar sinking sensation in my primary stomach. "Sir, he's found us." The readouts showed massive hollow spaces beneath the lunar surface. Perfectly geometric cavities that no natural satellite should possess. Stone was staring at his instruments with the kind of expression humans get when they realize the universe just became a much bigger, scarier place. That's when everything went sideways faster than a drunk pilot in an asteroid field. Stone wasn't content to just make his discovery and report it back to Earth like a good little astronaut. No, he had to go and do the most human thing possible. He had to investigate personally. While his team was asleep, he suited up, grabbed a cutting torch, and started looking for a way inside. Sir, Plex2's voice was now reaching frequencies that could shatter crystal. He's trying to breach maintenance hatch 77 Alpha. That leads directly to the main corridor. I pointed out helpfully because apparently my job description included stating the obvious during crisis situations. Voss Prime stood up slowly, his massive frame casting shadows across the command center. For a moment, I thought he might actually order Stone's elimination. It would have been easy, a small atmospheric leak, an equipment malfunction, just another tragic accident in the dangerous business of space exploration. The Council had contingency plans for exactly this scenario. Instead, he did something that surprised everyone in the room, including himself. "Open the hatch," he said quietly. "Sir." Plex2's voice cracked so badly it sounded like he was going through puberty again. "You heard me. Open the hatch and escort Captain Stone to Conference Room Prime. It's time we had a little chat." That conversation changed everything. Not just for Stone, not just for Earth, but for the entire galactic community. Because when humans discover they are not alone in the universe, they don't panic, they don't hide, and they definitely don't follow anyone else's rules about first contact protocols. They get curious. And when humans get curious, the universe becomes a much more interesting place. Stone sat in that conference room for 6 hours, asking questions that our xenosociologists had assumed no primitive species would think to ask. Questions about galactic politics, trade routes, technological advancement curves, and most disturbingly, military capabilities. "So let me get this straight," Stone said, leaning back in a chair like he was discussing the weather instead of the complete overthrow of everything his species thought they knew about reality. "You have been watching us for 300 years. You have got this whole galactic government thing going on, and nobody thought to maybe introduce themselves?" Voss Prime, who had been expecting fear, confusion, or at least a reasonable amount of mental breakdown, found himself on the defensive. "The Galactic Council has strict protocols regarding contact with developing species." Developing. Stone rolled the word around like he was tasting something unpleasant. That's a polite way of saying primitive, right? "Your species lacks faster-than-light travel, unified planetary government, and sustainable energy solutions," Voss Prime listed. "By galactic standards, you are barely out of the Stone Age." That's when Stone smiled. Not a friendly smile, but the kind of smile that predators get when they spot something interesting to hunt. "Commander, with all due respect, you might want to update your intelligence files." He pulled out a small device, nothing fancy, just a standard-issue Earth tablet, and showed us footage that made every alien in that room suddenly very, very nervous that Earth's first warp drive test had been conducted 3 months earlier. Successfully. The silence that followed was broken only by the sound of Plex2 fainting and hitting the floor with a satisfying thud. "You see, Commander," Stone continued conversationally, "we have been reverse engineering some interesting debris that's been falling to Earth over the past century. Funny thing about watching a species, sometimes they notice you watching back. That debris he mentioned, parts of our own ships that had suffered minor accidents during observation runs. Nothing critical, nothing that should have been recoverable by a primitive species using basic metallurgy and combustion-based chemistry. Except humans don't use basic anything when they are really motivated. You take our quantum-entangled hull fragments and somehow figure out how to replicate the quantum fields. You find our antimatter residue and build containment systems that shouldn't be possible with your level of material science. You discover our subspace communication arrays and crack the encryption in less time than it took us to develop IT. In short, you did what humans do best. You broke all the rules and made it look easy. "So here's my question, Commander," Stone said, standing up and walking to what he somehow knew was our main tactical display. "Are we going to keep playing this game where you pretend to be invisible and we pretend not to notice? Or are we going to have an honest conversation about what happens next? What happened next was the most frantic series of emergency communications in Galactic Council history. Every observation post in human space was reporting the same thing. You weren't just aware of our presence. You were actively hunting our assets. The International Space Agency had launched what you call deep survey missions to every major body in your solar system. What you didn't announce publicly was that these missions were specifically designed to locate and catalog alien technology. Within 6 months, you'd found observation posts on Mars, Europa, Titan, and 3 different asteroid installations that we'd thought were perfectly hidden. But the real kicker? You didn't just find them. You started knocking. Doctor Lisa Park was the first human to make contact with our Mars facility. She walked right up to what we thought was an invisible entrance, knocked 3 times, and waited patiently for someone to answer. When a junior operator on duty opened the door, mostly out of shock, she handed him a carefully prepared first contact package. It included mathematical proofs, linguistic frameworks, cultural information, and a handwritten note that simply said, "We know you are watching. Let's talk." The junior operator's name was Flex 7, and to his credit, he managed to avoid fainting long enough to escort Dr. Park to the facility commander. The conversation that followed became required reading at every diplomatic academy in known space. Dr. Park, Commander Test Prime, had said, trying to maintain some semblance of official protocol, "Your species isn't supposed to be capable of detecting our installations." "Commander Test Prime," Park replied, somehow knowing the alien's name despite never having been introduced. "Your species isn't supposed to be this bad at staying hidden." She then proceeded to outline exactly how humans had been tracking Galactic Council assets for the better part of 2 decades. Radio telescope arrays detecting subspace leakage, gravitational sensors picking up mass inconsistencies, spectral analysis revealing atmospheric compositions that didn't match known planetary data. "The thing is," Park explained, "humans are really good at noticing things that don't belong. It's kind of our thing. We evolved as persistence hunters, which means we were specifically adapted to spot anomalies and track them relentlessly until we understand them." That word, persistence, turned out to be the key to understanding everything that came next. Because once humans decide they want to understand something, they don't stop. Ever. The Galactic Council's response was predictably bureaucratic. Emergency sessions, committee formations, subcommittee appointments, and enough red tape to gift wrap a small planet. While they debated protocols and procedures, humans kept doing human things. You built bigger telescopes. You launched more probes. You developed better sensors. And most importantly, you started asking the kind of questions that made even seasoned galactic observers uncomfortable. Questions like, if you have been watching us for 300 years, what other species are you watching? And what exactly is this Galactic Council thing? And why weren't we invited? And my personal favorite, you mentioned you have been categorizing species development. What category are we in now? That last question was particularly uncomfortable because the honest answer was, we have no idea. The standard classification system had categories for everything from primitive hunter-gatherers to advanced spacefaring civilizations. But humans didn't fit any of the established patterns. You were simultaneously primitive and advanced, peaceful and aggressive, logical and completely insane. You built nuclear weapons before you figure out how to feed everyone on your planet. You created global communication networks and used them primarily to share pictures of cats. You developed space travel and used it to play golf on the moon. Most confusing of all, you treated first contact with an advanced alien civilization like it was just another Tuesday. While the council debated, humans acted. The Mars facility found itself hosting regular diplomatic meetings. The Europa station became an impromptu cultural exchange center. Even our asteroid installations were receiving friendship visits from human survey teams who somehow always managed to find the exact right airlock to knock on. And through it all, humans kept being human. You brought gifts, music, art, food, stories. You asked endless questions about everything from our reproductive biology to our favorite recreational activities. You challenged our assumptions, argued with our conclusions, and somehow made friends with creatures who'd been specifically trained to remain objective observers. Plex 2, the nervous technician who'd fainted during Stone's revelation, became pen pals with a human engineer named Tommy Chun, who taught him how to play chess and shared detailed explanations of human humor. They exchanged letters for months before anyone realized they were accidentally conducting the first successful human-alien cultural exchange program in galactic history. But it was Voss Prime who really understood what was happening. During one of our routine briefings, he looked up from a report about human technological advancement and said something that would be quoted in xenological textbooks for generations. They're not just making contact with us. They're adopting us. He was right. Somewhere in the process of discovering they weren't alone in the universe, humans had decided that meant they now had new neighbors to look out for. The same species that had spent centuries fighting wars over resources and territory were now sharing their planetary chocolate supply with alien observation teams and asking concerned questions about our mental health during long-duration missions. That IT was the most human response possible to finding out the universe was bigger than they'd imagined. They immediately started trying to make it better. The Council, meanwhile, was still trying to figure out what filing cabinet to put Earth in point 6. Months after first contact, the Galactic Council finally managed to schedule an emergency session. By then, humans had already established trade agreements with 17 different observation posts, started a student exchange program with our xenobiology department, and somehow convinced our head chef to teach them how to make Zentarian spice bread. I was sitting in my quarters, reviewing reports that read like science fiction written by someone who'd never heard of logic when the priority alert came through. Emergency transmission from Council Central. All observation personnel were to report for immediate debriefing on Earth Station Alpha. Earth Station Alpha. Yeah, you read that right. In the time it took the Council to argue about protocols, humans had built their own space station and invited us to use it as a neutral meeting ground. Because apparently when humans decide to join the galactic community, they don't wait for an invitation. They build their own embassy and send out party invites. The station itself was a marvel of human engineering wrapped around stolen alien technology. They'd taken our quantum stabilizers, improved them by 30%, and somehow made them run on what they cheerfully called coffee-powered fusion reactors. I'm still not entirely sure how caffeine-based energy systems work, but the humans insisted they were more reliable than our antimatter cores. Captain Stone met me at the airlock, looking like he'd been promoted several times and given responsibilities that would have terrified most seasoned galactic diplomats. Behind him stood a small army of humans wearing uniforms I didn't recognize and expressions that suggested they were having way too much fun with the whole first contact situation. Kex-Nine, Stone called out, extending his hand in that peculiar human greeting ritual. Welcome aboard. Hope you don't mind, but we have made a few modifications to standard diplomatic protocols. That should have been my first warning sign. The conference room they led me to was unlike anything in the official Galactic Diplomatic Handbook. Instead of the standard sterile white chamber with regulation seating arrangements, they created something that looked like a cross between a military command center and a neighborhood coffee shop. Comfortable chairs, multiple screens displaying real-time data feeds, and a beverage station that seemed to cater to the dietary needs of at least 40 different species. We figured if we're going to be having these conversations regularly, we might as well be comfortable, explained Dr. Park, who'd apparently become Earth's de facto alien relations specialist. Plus, we have learned that most species think better when they are not stressed about basic physical needs. She wasn't wrong. In my 3 centuries of diplomatic experience, I'd never been offered a chair that actually fit my physiology or beverages that didn't taste like recycled atmospheric processors. But the real surprise came when the other attendees started arriving. Representatives from every major galactic power, senior council members who usually communicated only through official channels, and military commanders who I'd only heard about in classified briefings. The humans hadn't just invited everyone to their little party. They'd somehow convinced the most reclusive beings in known space to show up. Commander Voss Prime arrived last, looking like he'd aged a decade in the past 6 months. He took one look at the setup, shook his head, and muttered something in Old Zentarian that roughly translated to "This is either brilliant or catastrophic, and I can't tell which." "Ladies, gentlemen, and distinguished beings of various classifications, Stone began, addressing the room with the casual confidence of someone who'd apparently decided that ancient diplomatic hierarchies were more like suggestions than rules. Thank you all for accepting our invitation to discuss humanity's integration into galactic society. Integration, not application for membership, not gradual introduction, but integration. As if it was already a done deal and they were just working out the paperwork. Council Prime Minister Zex-12, ancient being whose species had been part of the galactic government since before humans discovered fire, leaned forward with what I recognized as barely controlled irritation. Captain Stone, I believe there may be some misunderstanding about the purpose of this gathering. The Council has not yet completed its evaluation of humanity's readiness for contact, much less membership. Stone smiled, that predatory smile again. Prime Minister, with all due respect, I think you might be operating under some outdated assumptions. He gestured to one of the wall displays, which immediately showed a real-time map of human space activities. Ships traveling between Earth, Mars, and the outer colonies. Mining operations on asteroids that shouldn't have been accessible to their technology level. And most disturbing of all, exploration vessels heading toward the edge of the solar system at velocities that suggested they not only perfected faster-than-light travel, but had somehow made it more efficient than our own. As of this morning, humanity has active operations in 14 star systems. Stone continued conversationally. We have established contact with 6 non-council species, signed mutual aid agreements with 3 different independent worlds, and somehow accidentally prevented what your intelligence services tell us would have been a pretty nasty pirate uprising in the Kepler sector. The silence that followed was broken by what sounded like Prime Minister Zex-12 choking on his own respiratory fluids. That's impossible, he wheezed. Our monitoring systems would have detected any human expansion beyond your solar system. Dr. Park cleared her throat politely. Actually, Prime Minister, your monitoring systems have been detecting our expansion for the past 4 months. Your analysts just kept filing the reports under equipment malfunction because the data didn't match your theoretical models of human capabilities. She was right, of course. I'd seen those reports myself. Gravitational anomalies that suggested massive ships moving at impossible speeds. Energy signatures that looked like advanced reactor systems operating in regions where no advanced civilizations were supposed to exist. Radio transmissions in human languages coming from star systems that were supposedly uninhabited. The intelligence community had dismissed it all as sensor errors and computational glitches. After all, humans were barely capable of interplanetary travel, much less interstellar colonization. The idea that they could have developed working warp drives, established colonies, and begun their own exploration programs in less than a year was simply ridiculous. Except they had. How? Voss Prime asked, and I could hear genuine curiosity replacing his usual military stoicism. Your species lacks the basic theoretical framework for faster-than-light physics. Our educational assessments indicated you were at least 50 years away from even understanding the underlying principles. Stone and Park exchanged one of those looks the humans use when they are about to reveal something particularly amusing. Commander, can I ask you something? When your people were developing warp technology, how long did the process take? Approximately 400 standard years, Voss Prime replied. From initial theoretical work to practical application. And how many species contributed to that development? The project involved collaborative research from 12 different worlds, with primary contributions from species that had already mastered subspace physics. Stone nodded thoughtfully. Right. Now, when humans want to solve a problem, we don't spend 400 years on theoretical research. We find someone who's already solved it and ask them to explain it. The implications of that statement hit the room like a physical force. In the 6 months since first contact, humans hadn't just been making friends and trading cultural artifacts. They'd been learning. From every species they'd encountered, they'd gathered information, techniques, and technologies that they then combined, improved, and implemented with terrifying efficiency. You have been reverse engineering our technology, Minister Zex-12 accused. Not just yours, Dr. Park corrected cheerfully. We have been studying everything we could get our hands on. Turns out, when you have been watching someone for 300 years, you leave a lot of educational materials lying around. They found our technical manuals, maintenance records from observation posts, equipment specifications from crash probes, even personal logs from lonely technicians who documented their work in excessive detail because they had nothing else to do during long assignments. And humans, being humans, had read everything, understood most of it, and improved on the rest. The thing about human engineering, Stone explained, is that we don't really believe in impossible. When we encounter something that shouldn't work according to our understanding of physics, we don't conclude that it's impossible. We conclude that our understanding of physics is incomplete. Case in point, Dr. Park added, pulling up another display. Your quantum entanglement communication systems? Brilliant design, but you're only using about 60% of the available quantum states. We have managed to improve bandwidth by almost 300% just by utilizing the quantum configurations you were discarding as unstable. I watched Minister Zex-12's expression cycle through disbelief, horror, and what I was pretty sure was grudging admiration. The quantum configurations humans were casually describing as underutilized have been considered theoretically impossible by our best physicists for centuries. Furthermore, Stone continued, apparently warming to his topic, your warp drive designs are incredibly elegant, but they are optimized for safety and reliability rather than speed or efficiency. Perfectly reasonable approach for a spacefaring civilization that values longevity over rapid expansion. But humans, well, we have never been particularly concerned with playing it safe. He showed us technical specifications for human warp drives that made our military engineers' most optimistic projections look conservative. They'd taken our careful, tested designs and modified them in ways that should have resulted in catastrophic system failures and probably small-scale spatial anomalies. Instead, they'd created propulsion systems that were faster, more efficient, and somehow more stable than anything in the Galactic fleet. The really interesting part, Dr. Park said, is that once we started sharing our modifications with the other species we have encountered, they were able to improve their own technologies by similar margins. Turns out, nobody had been thinking to ask what would happen if you deliberately destabilized the quantum matrix while simultaneously overcharging the antimatter containment system. Because that would be insane, Voss Prime muttered. Yeah, probably Stone agreed. But it works great. What followed was 3 hours of the most uncomfortable diplomatic discussion in recorded galactic history. Not because of hostility or cultural misunderstandings, but because humans kept casually revealing that they'd already solved problems that had been stumping galactic civilization for millennia. Resource scarcity? They'd developed self-replicating mining systems that could process entire asteroid belts without environmental impact. Political instability? Their colony worlds had somehow achieved functional democracy across multiple species without a single armed conflict. Economic inequality? They'd created trade networks that were actually improving living standards for everyone involved instead of just concentrating wealth among the already powerful. Let me make sure I understand this correctly, Minister Zex-12 said during what was supposed to be a brief recess but had turned into an impromptu xenopsychology seminar. In less than one standard year, humanity has developed superior technology, established interstellar colonies, created stable multi-species governments, and solved several fundamental problems that the Galactic Council has been struggling with for centuries. That's about the size of it, Stone confirmed. And you did this by asking questions and trying things that seemed impossible. Pretty much. And your species considers this normal behavior? Stone and Dr. Park looked at each other, then back at the minister. Is there another way to do it? Park asked. That question sparked a 4-hour philosophical debate about the nature of intelligence, progress, and what humans apparently called the obvious approach to obvious problems. By the end of it, half the council representatives were taking notes, a quarter were requesting formal technology sharing agreements, and the rest were trying to figure out how to recruit human advisors for their own governments. The final session was supposed to address humanity's official status within galactic society. Instead, It turned into something resembling a job fair, where various galactic powers tried to convince humans to help them solve their most persistent problems. The Altarian Trade Federation wanted human economists to restructure their financial systems. The Kepler Defense Alliance requested human tactical advisors to help with their piracy problems. Even the isolationist Void Dwellers sent a representative asking if humans might be interested in consulting on some minor terraforming challenges they've been facing for only about 6,000 years. This is unprecedented, Minister Zex-12 announced as the official proceedings were winding down. Never in the history of the Galactic Council has a newly contacted species become so thoroughly integrated so quickly. Well, Dr. Park replied, we appreciate the warm welcome, but I should probably mention that this isn't exactly unprecedented for us. What do you mean? Human history is basically a series of different groups encountering each other, having some initial confusion, then figuring out how to work together to make things better for everyone. We have been doing this for thousands of years, just on a smaller scale. She pulled up historical data showing human cultural development, technological advancement, and social evolution over the past few millennia. The pattern was unmistakable: contact, conflict, cooperation, and ultimately integration that left everyone involved better off than they'd been before. The only difference, Stone added, is that this time the different groups happen to be alien species instead of different human civilizations. The basic approach remains the same. Figure out what everyone's good at, share knowledge and resources, and work together to solve problems that nobody could handle alone. As the meeting concluded and various representatives began making their travel arrangements, I found myself standing in the observation lounge with Voss Prime, looking out at Earth through the station's main windows. The planet looked different now that I knew what was happening on its surface. Not primitive, not developing, but actively engaged in the process of joining and reshaping galactic civilization. They're going to change everything, Voss Prime said quietly. Yeah, I agreed. And they're going to make it look easy. The worst part is, they are probably right about most of it. Their modifications work, their solutions are effective, and their approach to problem solving is genuinely superior to our traditional methods. The best part, I corrected, is that they're sharing all of it. They could have kept their technological advances secret, used their superior capabilities to dominate or exploit other species. Instead, they are actively trying to help everyone. Voss Prime nodded slowly. It's the most human thing they could do. Discover they are part of something bigger and immediately start trying to make it better. 3 years have passed since that meeting. Humans now hold advisory positions in most major galactic governments. Their colonies serve as neutral ground for diplomatic negotiations, and their technology has revolutionized everything from interstellar communication to agricultural development. The Luna Base Observation Station is still operational, but its mission has changed completely. Instead of monitoring a primitive species, we are now serving as the primary coordination center for the most ambitious scientific and cultural exchange program in galactic history. And yes, humans are still the most entertaining show in the universe. The difference is, now we are all part of the cast. Last week, a human engineer named Bobby Park, Dr. Lisa Park's younger brother, figured out how to use our quantum observation equipment to create real-time holographic communication across galactic distances. His first test message was a three-dimensional recording of his cat playing with a ball of yarn, transmitted simultaneously to 47 different star systems. The response was overwhelming. Apparently, cats are universally adorable, and yarn-based entertainment transcends all known cultural barriers. Oh, now, we have a galaxy's first interstellar cat video network, managed from a hollow moon that was supposed to be humanity's most closely guarded secret. If that's not the most human outcome possible, I don't know what is.